BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Remember, Eden Court Theatre, Inverness, 1984. We'd wrapped. I forget which production. The set stripped. You asked me if I'd be going for last orders with the crew. When I said yes, you fired back an almost insolent, "Good." And I will never forget the bright, searching look you fixed me with. Giddy in compliment to that eye-watering self-possession which first drew me to you. The Highland tomboy lighting technician, who'd rather eat her own tongue than say a syllable more than she needed to. Every young man's lance was levelled in that pub. At 43, I was already too old for such tournaments, and even when of age, I avoided them. So, that night, I adopted the role of shadow. Your shadow. Stuart Cathcart, production manager, was first to offer you a drink. Gin and tonic. In stepped Drew, our sound technician, chirping the word quinine. One heard the glug of sinking hearts. Oh, the blank stares. Stuart Cathcart's forest fire of a blush. Drew strolled amongst the ruins of us, explaining that tonic water's bitter taste was thanks to quinine, an anti-malarial prophylactic, and from there went on through a few steps of adolescently showy digression to suggest that were it not for quinine, 400 years of Caucasian colonialism should never have been possible. All of which I knew, and could have expanded upon no end. How a Jesuit priest's observation and exportation of indigenous medicinal practices amongst the Quechua peoples of 17th century Peru stemmed early modern Rome's malaria epidemic, for example. But there, in that bar, I was as silent as solar wind. And so Drew it was who fetched your gin and tonic, who indeed bought the entire next round. And it was he with whom you left that night, and he with whom you stayed for the next few months. Of course it stung me. But far better that than being drawn into the inevitable struggles for dominion, thinly disguised as good crack. This is why I find your old favourite, Polly Ashgrove, so refreshing. His language is a flat mélange of TV and tabloid. He talks about drug czars, deets, photobombing. When he lies, he pulls a devious face, because lying is devious. When he's happy, he smiles, all the time. When he's excited, his eyebrows rise almost off his face, and he talks until he's breathless. He behaves thus because the channel between his emotions and their manifestation is unsophisticated, which is to say, free of the toxic dissembling and thirst for power that passes for civilized conduct. And he continues to keep that channel clear, not just as a consequence of the various social incontinencies that characterize his unique set of disabilities, but so that you too will always know where you are with him. Sure, he can be as passive-aggressive as the next man, but I guarantee that at some point he'll hand himself to you, bare his soul, and in the process, all your own vile hypocrisies. Not that I think of Polly as disabled. Since 1996, he has lived here with me 4 days a week, and I can faithfully report that he keeps a clean house, holds down 2 jobs, and leads a stellar virtual life as the impossibly promiscuous Steve Brett. A faster, smarter, more humane wit than 99% of the norms who visit these internet chat rooms. I have witnessed him touch-type his merry way into and through threesomes, orgies, you name it. It is thanks to Polly's online expertise that I have for years now availed myself of those very chat rooms and many others. With over 15 avatars ranging from Ski Lodge Lothario to the ghost of a hummingbird, I live half my life online. Polly calls me Sonic, after the hedgehog. Of my real-life circle, I'm just about the last one standing. But I have made profound and enduring bonds with people in the virtual world. A sex life? At my age? Why, yes. I have regular online trysts with Sweetie Pie 666, Discreet Wife, and Queen Elizabeth I. Who knows? Perhaps one of them is you. So, virtual sex, yes, and many other fulfilling and challenging interactions. An ongoing one of which, with a young, broken-hearted African-American by the name Credence Vermont, of whom more later, has brought me here, back to you. Did I ever openly apologize to you, Nadine? At the very least, this letter is that. You will not be surprised to hear that Polly is wholly against my attempting to make contact with you. In my view, even if I don't manage to track you down, the writing of these words is an end in itself. But I digress. I daydream it was exasperation with my lack of vim that brought you down from the scaffold that morning. If Archie Devine will not run fast enough to catch me, I will slow my progress to the point that he is unable to do anything but. I heard your landing from the foyer. At first I thought the set had collapsed. But there you were when I came in, lying prone, the expression on your face one of serene contentment. Drew, your learned beau, was shrill, ineffectual, headless. I saw to everything, from calling an ambulance to ensuring the show went on. A cleanly broken back, no nerve damage. Lucky you. Lucky me, that since all you had to do was lie in traction, you craved distraction. Every day, for 6 weeks, I was at your hospital bedside, brought you flowers, fruit, pastries, read to you, filled you in on the intrigues at work. You offered, in return, nothing other than your stillness. I was thrilled by that first of all, and later amazed by your willingness to be still. That walk down the ward at weekends, your sleepy smile, your body and bedsheets one great cataract of rioting light. As I arrived home one evening towards the end of your stay in hospital, I found my sister Olivia, her husband, and their 2 daughters waiting for me. They'd driven the 200 miles from Troon and were sitting in their Morris Oxford outside my digs. I see Olivia's red jumper, her open duffel coat, curls. Husband Harry leans toward her from the driver's seat. "I'm sorry," were her first words on getting out. Our parents had been killed in a head-on collision at the Forfar bypass. Harry opened the driver door and froze, half in, half out of the car. He'd a cigarette on, his hair a glittering Brill-cream wave. "Why drive all the way up here when you could more easily have driven to be with them?" I asked. "Why not phone?" Olivia seemed only then to recognize the quixotic nature of what they'd done, and burst into tears. Harry danced around the front of the car, one arm extended. He stopped a centimetre short of embracing her. The daughters howled. I stayed put. Orphans all. Olivia and the girls took my bed, while Harry slept on the living room sofa. I lay awake on the floor all night. Yes, because my parents had been killed, but more so because the following day would be the first in 6 weeks that I did not see you. I neglected to call to let you know I would not be coming. Even in traction, with a broken back, you seemed so capable. Death certificates, funeral arrangements, probate. The worst was over within a fortnight. By the time I got back to the hospital, you were 3 days gone. I found your parents' address in the theatre personnel file. It was not until I saw you with them, in their house, doddering robotically here and there in a spinal jacket, that our 17-year age gap fully struck me. And how indifferently, in your eagerness to be up, you greeted me. So soon after the passing of my folks, it was enough to drive me out of your house and out of Inverness. In the 37 years since it happened, I've only ever shared that detail with 2 people, my sister Olivia and Credence Vermont. She didn't get why I turned on a heel and walked away from you. He halfway did.
She sees the job title, the status, a future, but not the man. And you, being a textbook beta, at first you can't believe she's even into you, never mind see that she's using you. But, God bless them, losing your parents wakes you up. And props for dumping her, man. Stacy, in her prime? Because if that's me, I gotta tell you, I'm hanging in there. I'm in 26 years of drought. But I get you. Respect. That was a blow struck in this war of wars. Better be a casualty than the collaborator.
I imagine you to be the person you were, completely clued up. If so, you will know exactly what I mean when I tell you that Credence Vermont, though he vehemently denies it, is a card-carrying incel. Just in case, incel stands for involuntary celibate. Though the term was initially coined by a lonely young woman, the movement, currently flourishing online, is comprised of young men who, while desperate for sex, are, by their own judgment, unattractive, socially inept, beyond wanting, hence, involuntarily celibate. Personally, I have had sex with a total of 3 people in my life. 2 one-night stands, and you. Nadine, I have drowned in loneliness. No one to blame but myself for that. Credence and pals, on the other hand, believe the entirety of modern life is rigged against them. Back in the day, a woman needed a man. Her reason for being revolved around marriage, children, homemaking, the very suppression of her own personhood. Post-sexual revolution, the rise of feminism, that's no longer the case. According to incels, these progressive developments have resulted in a deregulated sexual marketplace that favours the top 20% of men, so-called chads. And by top 20%, be in no doubt, we are talking about the best-looking, as judged according to eugenics and scientific racism, the tallest, most chiselled, square-jawed, richest. You can see where this is going, right? Slaves to hypergamy, the vast majority of women, from the genetically superior Stacys to the more ordinary Beckys, pursue these chads, whose only interest is in sowing their wild oats, leaving the bottom 80% of men, dregs like Credence and me, to be spurned by the leftovers. The attitude of the most moderate incel towards these sexually successful groups, particularly the Stacys, might generously be described as Victorian. At the other end of the scale, they are murderous. See Elliot Rodger, Alec Manassian, Jake Davison, etc., etc. Unsurprisingly, incel culture is riddled with white supremacy. But strangely enough, the community is not without diversity. Credence Vermont is a case in point. True to incel form, he characterized my walking away from you as a blow struck in this war of wars. Well, that's what I'm afraid of. And it's largely why I'm writing to you. If it was a strike, then goodness, you struck back.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Big bust up with Polly. The old him is not dead, only dormant. A week ago, as I sat down to continue this letter to you, he begged me to stop. At one point he was on his knees hanging onto my hand. When I pulled away from him, he kicked off. With broken plates, a cracked window pane, he managed to snap the spine of the Captain Scott biography I'm reading. Only when he bloodied my nose with a left hook did the fire go out the thing, and we both wept like babies, and I promised I'd never leave him. What happened between the two of you? I haven't seen him rage like that in forever. I remember having fled your parents' house and Inverness, finally finding work at Perth Theatre. Olivia and I refurbished the family home and put it on the market. With my inheritance, I bought this place. Mid-refurbishment, I was at Woolworths buying shelves when Polly, all of 15 years old, lurched in. The cashier crept and then marched after him, snapping, "Can I help you?" To which Polly replied with a drawn knife. Backup arrived in the shape of another member of staff and, after a tense standoff, the police. I found myself at the station, vouching for a boy I'd never met. No matter, the staff pressed charges. I took Polly home where his mother, recently divorced, scolded him with a weariness that was, hands down, the day's most depressing sight. And Polly cried, and she held him. And I resolved to set up the Superstar Sports Club. As you may recall, we received no help from local authority nor businesses. All monies invested in the setup and running of the thing came out of my pocket. Polly, Judy Crossley, who has Down syndrome, and I were the only attendees of our first meet. We played tig and catch. 36 years on, there are 23 of us. We have a small committee, comprised mainly of parents, and we've made links with other groups in Perth, Dundee, and even St Andrews. As well as our weekly sports club, we have organised sponsored walks and spells, car boot sales, and with help from various home care agencies, day trips to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Despite all that good work, we are still subject to what I can only describe as appalling social incontinence. The reception we get, even now, when we arrive en masse at the recreation centre, the giggling, the gasping, the horror. Why? Because Polly and pals are the earthquake that devours a million innocents. They're the hooded stranger at your kid's Christmas party, the unpalatable prospect of your own contingency. I suspect this is why you never warmed to him. In his own way, Credence, Vermont, is just as vulnerable.
God bless you for taking Polly under your wing. In the absence of order, existence is meaningless. These are the days of Sodom. Restore order, and the likes of me and Polly get a fair shot. We cannot simply be laughed or ignored off the face of the earth.
Societal consensus seems to be that misogyny is at the root of incel sexual failure. But I believe that sexual and social failure is just as often at the root of incel misogyny, and that at the root of this sexual and social failure are the usual culprits. Defunded support structures, inequity and instability of the capitalist workplace, indifferent or just plain poor parenting, broken homes, the rise of devices, but way more importantly, an increasingly solipsistic, hierarchical culture whose aggressive sexualization is evident in everything from the terrifying prevalence of pornography through advertising to films and TV. You rang me almost a whole year after I ran away from you. "Archie, I'm passing through Dromalder. Can we meet?" Your travelling companion, a boyfriend, stayed in the car, while you and I took tea in this kitchen, and, at last, you laughed, laid a hand on my arm, and thanked me for the hours I spent at your bedside. 3 weeks later you were back, alone. In the interim, all I'd done was dream. You drove us to the Sma Glen, Perthshire's own paradise. We climbed a hill, sat at the summit until the sky blushed, and as I watched you limp those last 100 yards back to the car through the confetti of surprise snow, it seemed to me that the glen had disguised itself as ours. You turned around, gilded by that low November sun, and because for the last time in my adult life I had no choice at all, I kissed you, half expecting a knockback, and thought I felt it coming, but your hands alighted, one on my neck, the other on my cheek. Your nose, eyes, and mouth, when we parted, screwed up as though you'd taken a hit of pollen, or were squinting into the light of things that may never be named. Returning via Amaury, we stopped and took dinner at its hotel. We could stay, you said, as we sat waiting for the bill. Nadine, I have never known a happier few hours than those we spent overnight at that place. You lived like your life depended on living. Hotel staff eating out of the palm of your hand, glowing, some of them, as though you were Elvis. And yes, of course I'd accompany you on a road trip across America. Swimming with dolphins in Crete? Sure. You owned everything in your orbit. The light bent towards you. But that night, you gave yourself to me. I just haven't the words. While you showered next morning, I stayed put, gazing out the window towards Glen Quaich and the future. When you emerged, wrapped in nothing but a body scarf, walked across the room and loitered amongst your scattered clothes, aware, but only scarcely, of your impossible gorgeousness, I lay there unravelling, grasping with sudden, terrifying lucidity that the light you'd lit in this little heart of mine could burn me to a crisp. When we were teenagers, my sister Olivia suffered bouts of undiagnosed depression. She called one Thursday lunchtime from Aberdeen University. My mother answered the phone. Their conversation long enough that my father and I, home from school, ate alone. "She's in one of her moods," said my mother, when she finally came into the kitchen. "I'm going up there." A couple of phone calls, and she'd arranged to take the following day off work. My father all the while wondering aloud, without actually attempting to bring her around to his way of thinking, why she couldn't wait until Sunday, and we'd all be able to go. My mother ignored him. At next morning's breakfast, they bickered about something unrelated. As she was putting on her raincoat, my mother said, "Back by 6. You'll have to manage dinner on your own." This for the first time since they'd married. And she was gone. How eerie to see my father, normally so chatty, so wry, so sly, staring at the closed door. I took lunch at school. We muddled through the making of dinner, the two of us hindering one another as we fumbled about the kitchen. The phone rang while we were eating. I hovered in the hallway. You could hear her voice on the other end of the line. My father wilted on the spot. For a moment you could see the boy he'd once been, and was yet. "Your mother's staying in Aberdeen overnight." Perhaps it was then, in the hallway shadows, that I realized all relationships are characterized by acts of staggering savagery, that love is a cudgel. My father, shy of 50, easily 30 years of life left in him, and already finished by nothing real, by an idea, an ideal. When my mother came back through the door on Sunday afternoon, I remember thinking with sudden incandescent confusion that I'd never seen her or anyone else look so beautiful. A week past Amaury, you moved all your belongings into my house. Within a month, I realized just how far away I was from being any of those things you clearly believed me to be, and how little chance I stood of ever becoming them. By leaving your bedside, and then Inverness with nary a word, I was the first man, however pale, diminutive, and effeminate, to walk away from you. And so, wasn't it pride, in part, that brought you to my door? Furthermore, Nadine, you had been broken in two, and there was I, obliging you every day with physical and psychological sustenance. You fell for me as you'd have fallen for anyone even vaguely eligible who'd done the same thing. Those furious come curious looks you fired at me as I walked up the ward. Who is this man? Sets my heart racing so. Simple. The one whom, to maintain that exalted position in your affections, would have to cripple you permanently. Not that it came to that. You drenched me in the rays of your comet's tail. Good God, we flew. And if a man such as I is to invite an astronomical phenomenon into his home, he'd better wear the correct clothing, or make space. I made space. You grew, if possible, in fortitude, confidence, conviction, incandescence, and I grew in sympathy with you. The demonstrations we attended, anti-apartheid, anti-poll tax, student loans, our hunt for the Holy Grail in the south of France, wild swimming at Rackwick, our tiny garden transformed into a satellite of the Amazon, bursting with unlikely all sorts, and yes, we drove across America. You taught me the power of now, how to live. Little old me in a state of constant arousal, and you, to my persistent disbelief, always up for it. On one of our then weekly trips to the swimming baths in Dundee, Polly managed to swim half a width without those ridiculous flowery water wings he'd insist on wearing. We were high as kites. His face when I suggested the sauna, perfect terror. But in we went, Polly huffing and puffing until we sat down, and he hunched his shoulders, turning his head in towards my chest, away from the rash of curious gazes, every one of which I, pale, diminutive, scrawny archidivine, stared down. Polly looked to me every few moments to lead the way out, but I stayed put. No real idea of quite how caged he felt, until he began bellowing, Kylie Minogue's "I Should Be So Lucky." I joined in at the chorus, clapping my hands as the first punter upped and left, followed by the slow string of all the others, any one of whom could have flattened me, and I threw in a few heys and hoes, Polly shuffling his funky stuff along the bench, hands up, tongue out, a senile demon's grin on. When I started writing to you, I imagined a 2-page effort. But the more I set down, the more I find to say. As I was finishing off tonight, Polly came in and sat on the end of the bed in his pyjamas. I read him the Dundee caper, and not only did he not laugh, he kept quiet, still, head bowed. I asked him what was up. He shot me a glance, eyes flicking sorrowfully over my swollen nose and textbook black eye, but an answer was a full 5 minutes coming. "She ignored me," he said.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
How about this? Polly, clearly repentant for assaulting me, has channeled his online detective and found you. It's no surprise at all to me to hear that you are an itinerant primary school art teacher. Nothing is more invigorating than children. I imagine you surrounded by them, glowing, almost immortal. Lothian, though. I'd have had you pegged as Glasgow. Anyway, somehow Polly has also managed to get hold of your home address, which I've added to the beginning of this letter. Yes, letter. It's all real now. I will be sending it. We saw your place on Google Maps. Semi-detached in a cul-de-sac isn't quite what I imagined either, but you've done well for yourself, Nadine. I note with interest that your surname is unchanged. A Monday. Dinner. Nearly 4 years into our relationship. I was making breaded fish, peas, potatoes, when the phone rang. It was you. "I'll be late." No big deal. By then you were working in Dundee at a resources centre for the unemployed. Most evenings you'd call ahead to let me know you'd be going for drinks with your colleagues. You never failed to invite me, and I never failed to decline, because apart from a surely mutual feeling I'd cramp your style, I hadn't the energy of/for your friends, none of whom was over 30, and all of whom seemed to have been reared on rocket fuel. The other side of the coin, a Sunday afternoon, chez divine. I sit reading the paper while you watch television. Me. I note with interest that there's a recital of Stravinsky's Firebird at the Caird Hall soon. Would you be interested in going? You. Do you want me to come? Me. The last time you came you seemed so bored, and I know you're not fond of classical music. You. So you don't want me to come? Me. I just don't want you sitting there out of some sense of duty wishing you were somewhere else. You. I want to come if you want me to come. Me. But I don't want you to come because I want you to come. I want you to come because you want to come. This conversation and variations of it, every time I floated the idea of going anywhere. Back to that night. I was in bed by 11, and there I was at 12, wide-eyed in the dark, my heart bulleting at the slightest sound. And there I was still, 3 in the morning, where the door finally did go. And there I remained, waiting out another age of God knows what you were up to in the kitchen, and pretending to be asleep, when at last, booze infused, you climbed in beside me. Such was the intermittent pattern of our evenings over the next 18 months. And always I'd lie awake until you came in, never once getting up to ask where you'd been, because that was your right, and because what pale, diminutive, effeminate Archie Devine did best, had always had to do best, was never show that he'd been gotten to. Not that I thought you were trying to get to me. You simply needed room to do whatever it is divinities do. Even when you came home at a humane 7 in the evening, ate and promptly threw up a jumbo bag of jelly beans, it did not chart with me that anything much was amiss. One Saturday morning after 9, you rang the bell, lost keys, quite drunk. You slumped in the settee and told me that you needed a break. From work, from the house, from Drumolder. You stopped short of me. I dared not ask. A friend of one of your female workmates had a timeshare in Italy. He was going there the following week, and had invited you and this girlfriend to spend the 10 days with him. By this time, I had either met or heard of all of your workmates with whom you went drinking and clubbing. Not so Mr. Timeshare. What was his name? The kind of trip you were planning. Surely you knew him well enough that you'd have mentioned him before. Derek. I hadn't heard of him, you said, because he was the friend of a friend, whom you'd only met in the last couple of months. And besides, there were plenty of other people, regular party pals, about whom you'd never said a word. Then, for the first time I'd ever seen, you cried. I was useless. You. If you don't want me to go, I won't go. Me. You clearly need a break. I can't afford to take one now. You. Just tell me what to do. Me. If you feel the need to go, you must go. You. But what do you want? Me. I want you to be happy. The week preceding your departure was a dream. You came straight home from work, we dined together, went to the theatre, the cinema, watched TV fast in one another's arms. Conversation about whether or not you should go seemed to occur on a daily basis and always ended, often tearfully, with you asking me to tell you what I wanted, and me affirming that if you felt the need for a break, you should take one. At the airport, goodness knows why, I recounted a detail from the night we all went to the bar in Inverness. Drew had just finished his quinine set piece. Completely outgunned, Stuart Cathcart blurted, "You almost got to see Norman Tebbett's Todger on the news last night." You laughed. We kissed. You left. Remember? The IRA had attempted to wipe out the Conservative government's cabinet's main players with a bomb planted at Brighton's Grand Hotel during a party conference there. Tebbett had the highest profile of any of the casualties. The news programmes played and replayed a clip of firemen carrying him out of the rubble on a stretcher. Grimacing with pain, pale as the grave, he looked a great deal frailer than his then 53 years. As they brought him down, a breeze tugged at the hem of his ripped pyjamas, and for one tantalising moment it seemed as though he might be indecently exposed. Luckily for him and the nation, a fireman was on hand to deftly preserve his modesty. 5 died. Tebbett's wife Margaret was paralysed. I once read an interview with Tebbett, a worryingly infantile broadsheet Hadget job, in which he said he'd wake during the night to change his wife's sleeping position so as to preserve her from the misery of bed sores. I made a cutting and have it still. Even now, what one is left with after reading the piece is benevolent envy of an intensely principled man, who not only knows what he thinks, but who always knew what he thought. The moment you left, I began to fray. You called that night to say you'd arrived safely. Voices in the background, sounds of cooking. When I asked for a contact number, your answer was a pause followed by 2 minutes of pen hunting, during which time I came to the realization that if we were to prevail, you were, as always, best left alone. At work, I tried to keep busy, inventing intensive chores to occupy my mind, but I'd be at them for what felt like hours, only to look up at the clock to find quarter hours had passed. How many books and films I began, in search of other lives to live, all abandoned early on. News of Bill Clinton's run for the US presidency was everywhere and shrill. Were he to win, he'd be the first American president elected in my lifetime, younger than I was. I found myself rooting against him, against the world's inexorable onward progression. Day 7. Friday. I called. You were on the point of going out. I went on to say that I felt I hadn't done enough for you, and that when you came back, our lives were going to be different. Good, you said. There was a protracted silence, out of which came your shocking rush to be gone. I panicked, thinking only to slow you down. I love you, I said. Another pause. And I you, was your hushed, arcane reply, designed, I supposed, not to embarrass you in front of present company. But now it seems to me that you were in fact trying to avoid telling me outright that you love me, or worse, that you understood mine was the utterance of someone already gone half mad, and were responding in kind. Galvanized by that good, I made a list of all the ways in which I'd improve, and called again that night with the intention of telling you to come back right away. No answer. On Saturday morning, I got through to a disconnected tone, and that's all I heard the many dozens of times I tried to call you over the weekend. Good God, Nadine! Good God! The morning you returned, I was at Perth Prison doing a theatre workshop. The moment I was free, I called you. What a joy to hear your voice. Lover, I said. I found you in bed, asleep. That you were fully clothed was strange, but in no way alarming. I was in the kitchen preparing brunch when you reappeared, hands clasped, your face riven in tearful misery. I said, "Oh no," staggered away from the table, trying to catch my breath. And then I'm not sure what, but I was in the garden, on my knees, you crumpling onto the doorstep. So many questions. Had it happened before? Did you enjoy it? Did you do it in the bath, the shower? Did you do it outside? Did you do it more than twice in one day? Was he younger than I was? Taller? Did you tell him about me? Yes to all but the last, because nothing that occurred had anything to do with me. I ran. Out of the garden, over the bridge, up Kirk Wynd to Woodhill Church graveyard, where I sat down and wept, until I could not bear the thought of anything other than being with you. And there you were, back in bed, in a vest and boxer shorts, your face with a boxer's post-fight puffiness, identical tuppenny-sized bruises on your inner biceps. I sat on the floor, and for one extraordinary moment felt fine. But then you spoke, words directed towards the ceiling. I had all the love for you, Archie. It's gone. There's nothing I can do about it. Hoarse suddenly, I said, "Wait." But you had not finished. For all my tenderness at the hospital, Once we were living together, I became and remained emotionally unavailable. Nothing you did elicited either positive or negative reaction from me. Even when you were coming home drunk all hours, even when you were planning to go on holiday with another man, I said nothing. Let's not forget those quotidian things. Choice of cereal, of toilet paper, of paint, bedclothes, TV shows, etc., about which I'd never deigned to make decisions. It was as though I'd left responsibility for my own happiness and the success of our relationship entirely in your hands. And given how disinterested I seemed in us, you found the hours of dedication I put into the many poems and scripts I wrote obscene. Likewise, my mentoring of Polly. You never once felt supported by me, nor validated, nor valued, nor listened to, nor loved. You swung your legs over the side of the bed and sat there glaring at me, livid with loathing.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
What then on that longest of days? I walked across town to my parents' house. It had been in the market for years with no takers. I neither ate nor slept that night. Next morning, I came back to you, in the hope that you'd change your mind. The house was immaculate. You, lovelier than ever, were in your raincoat at the kitchen table, writing me a note. A packed suitcase at your feet. Of all the moves you made, somehow this was the most heartless. Well, no doubt you were repaying me for the ways in which I abandoned you, first at the hospital, then at your parents' house. Stay, I said. But you left in something like the way my mother arrived from Aberdeen that Sunday morning. I followed you out, up the garden path, unable to say anything at all. The plane of your shoulders, that hood, the sound of raindrops in your coat, all so clear. I gave up at the gate. You did not turn around. I haven't seen you since.
She's what now? 64? Probably shacked up with some weak-ass beta bucks half her age. And you, 30 years on, 81 years old, still smarting. That's a signpost right there of how deeply embedded these materials are in the body, in the psyche, in the ancestral architecture.
I got hurt. Simple as that.
His sword resounded in the heads of mothers.
Oof, a Gododin.
Damn straight.
Where did you come across that?
I know Milton, too. Pope, Eliot, Scott, Bernard Shaw.
Really?
No more remarkable than your familiarity with Pound, Hemingway, Melville, Poe.
Well, slightly more remarkable than that, I'd say.
Ooh, segregated readerships.
No, I'm not saying that.
Just messing with you, sport. My guess. You know 3 black writers max. That's one more than I do. Wow, I hear you say. But there are 2 factors at play here. 1, the propensity of a parent culture, in this case WASP, to value more highly the works created by its own. 2, while the best black writers may be even better than their white counterparts, they will always be a minority concern, because the natural talents of their community lie elsewhere, in sports, entertainment, and the like, where most folks would know to look for them. Black writers, lawyers, architects, philosophers, engineers, and so forth, we are a tiny, obscure minority, and so it stands to reason that, in Western culture at least, we are fewer and lesser known.
Come on, CV. Sounds a lot like racial science. And the elephant-sized hole in your point is that, historically speaking, coloured writers simply haven't been afforded the same opportunities.
Black writers?
Oh, sorry. I'm a Scotsman of a certain age. Black as an adjective always carried such negative connotations.
Gotcha. Again. No, seriously, though. This heaving cesspit. The he, him, she, her, they, them, LGBTQ plus morass of it. Colored will get you shot in some neighborhoods.
But it's okay to say of colour. Never understood that one.
Me neither, and I'm the subject. But bro, you're honestly saying if only women had been given a fair crack at the whip, there'd be as many great female artists as there are male? No. Listen carefully. Men do, women are.
Women are. Well, I hope that's intended as a compliment.
It's a fact.
Positive prejudice at best. And as you surely know, if someone holds positive prejudices about you, they very likely hold negative ones too.
Bone up in the books, bro. Women are interested in people. It's no coincidence that female nurses outnumber male nurses 1,000 to 1. The male inclination from as early as age 2 is toward things, practical action, problem solving. A man is born to dominate, tame, control, and exploit his environment. Every city is a triumph of male will.
Ditto every gun and warhead and mineshaft and oil well.
The great works of art, science, philosophy, industry, and culture were forged by men. There is an order to things. Diverge from it at your peril, as you have found out. It is exactly why your relationship with the Stacy broke down and why, decades later, you're still smarting.
Says you, all of what, 25 years old?
Look at the mess we're in. Feminism has pursued equality at the expense of equilibrium. Our society is dying because women feel superior to us. But here is the news. 100th seed in the men's will always beat top seed in the women's. I say bring back the good old days when every girl was the property of her father, every woman the property of her husband. These days, females are free to indulge in their most hypergamous impulses. 80% of women compete for the top 20% of men. We, bottom 80%, are effectively doomed. 50 years ago, 20 even, I'm scoring without a doubt. Now, men need women and women need men. The difference is, men admit it. I am desperate to be in a relationship. Feminism, at best, teaches women they can have whatever man they want, and at worst, that they don't need men at all.
I find it crushing that an African American would praise a time when women were viewed as property and advocate the rolling back of social freedoms.
Huh. Freedoms? We are in a position now that if I even look at a woman I find attractive and she doesn't want me to be her life partner, then she's been Me Too'd. No wonder birth rates are plummeting. Radical feminism is bent on feminizing men. But, and this is a beautiful illustration of just the sort of contradiction with which feminism is riddled. In doing so, it turns us into the kind of men no woman could possibly want. You found that out the hard way.
You haven't a clue.
Oh, don't I? You hate what she did to you. Hate her for doing it to you. You hate her and you want to punish her. Why else would you be on a site like this? You are as outraged as I am about the grotesque societal imbalances behind your own violation.
This victim narrative is about you, not me.
How can you deny it? She destroyed you because you considered her weak for wanting you. She understood the value of having an older, wiser masculine force in her life and, hats off, made herself vulnerable in pursuit of that ideal. Baby, you had the real thing in the palm of your hand, a rarity in this shambles, and you blew it. She was not the problem. You were. I can think of no better illustration of how diseased things are. Hard times make hard men, who make tough decisions, which make easy times, which make soft men, who make poor decisions, which make hard times, etc., etc. We are in a time of soft men who make poor decisions. What we need is a robot war, an effective pandemic, a catastrophic natural disaster. Wipe out 90% of the world's population and start again, lessons learned, with a new order. Your Brexit, though a total catastrophe, was a valiant attempt to do just that. Likewise, our assault on the capital. Order creates harmony. How is 80% of women chasing 20% of men harmony? And herein lies a principal problem. While man occupies the top tier of all life, he has still not reached evolutionary perfection. He thrives on opposition, is at his optimum in times of war. In peacetime, left to his own devices, he tends towards entropy, decadence, selfishness, and, ultimately, misery. The aim and means of overcoming the current confounding times are the same: establishment and maintenance, coercive if necessary, of a codified order that recognizes biological hierarchy. Society and family with men at the head. Without doubt, this utopia lies on the other side of a bloodbath. But oh, the rewards. Fairness, harmony, love. Love is the lifeblood of a healthy body politic. Everyone is blessed, made more. In a diseased body, sex rules and love is a killer. Right now, we are like toddlers piloting bomb-laden lightning. Hell, love is God. Incur its wrath at your own peril. Both you and I can testify to that. But in a fair society, with a correctly established order, love cannot but touch us in the most heavenly ways.
Love? Hide behind the so-called failings of modern society all you want. Your misogyny rings clear.
As does yours, no. You as good as said it yourself. The positive prejudices that doomed your relationship have a flip side. I say it to you again. Why else would you be on this site?
So, you admit it. You hate women. They're the cause of all your ills. I don't know who broke your heart, little man, but get over it. It's called living.
Yeah, go ahead. Put me in that incel box. It's reassuring, right?
Your name, all smalls, capital ER, in Vermont. You're eulogizing Elliot Rodger, are you not?
Whatever you say, Chief.
A young man who murdered 6 people and injured 14 because he'd had a couple of bad experiences and couldn't get a girlfriend. Oh, boo-hoo! You know your problem, Credence, Vermont? At heart, you're a sentimental humanist. It's way darker out here than you could possibly dream, and the world will not be put to rights in accordance with your simplistic, fascistic, misogynistic Lego manifesto. Women are not the enemy. Society isn't the problem. We, the people who live in it, are the problem. Man, as you put it, is an incurable disease. You hit on it with your hard times make hard men set peace. The human race is nothing more than a migration of genes, generation by generation, body to body, job to job, dust to dust. Same successes, same failures, again and again and again. End of story. The trick is to live. You, barely born, are dead. I had died, hearts break, but you get up and get on with it. Which is why I'm going to build bridges with the Stacy, as you call her, because I'm a man, and men do.
Only 30 years too late.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah? And sometimes what doesn't kill you almost kills you. Look at yourself. I predict you'll come back in a box.
Have a nice life.
Watch this space, Grandpa. You're gonna see my name in lights.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Well, my dialogue with Credence Vermont crashed and burned. He's blocked me from his devices and platforms. I just hope to goodness he doesn't think I'm yet another old, racist white man, though I suspect that's unlikely given his affiliations. A paranoid, misogynistic, gun-lobbying Trump apologist who, while he dismisses the wilder claims of QAnon conspiracy theory, is sympathetic to the movement, and who wholly believes that feminism and the disintegration of the family has caused the disintegration of society. An African-American member of an incel community whose infection with supremacist creed has done nothing to dissuade him from paying a monthly subscription. Is it racist of me to say that he is in thrall to the very people and institutions that oppress him? Is it racist or just patronising that I felt I might be able to help him see the light? He certainly poured energy into saving me, and with a rhetoric so persuasive that I found myself questioning the forces at play in the breakdown of my relationship with you. He was on the money about one thing. While we were together, I did not feel myself worthy of you. That's why I stayed out of your way, made no demands. Nadine, I'm so sorry. I thought that's what you wanted, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. You also accused me of running away from your love. This, I'm afraid, was all projection, a manipulative attempt to tar me with his own brush. Credence was drawn to the incel movement thanks to a couple of short-lived, emotionally traumatic liaisons. Now, surrounded by similarly injured young men in an environment that reinforces his senses of hurt, indignation and entitlement, he has developed a highly toxic fear of sexual relationships. The solution? Listen to this. A new society born out of population devastation, in which true love for all is made possible by strict enforcement of gender hierarchies. I kid you not. This guy wants to instate some sort of Gilead so he can have safe sex. I promise you, I did not run away from your love. Because my sad secret, Nadine, is that I do not believe in it, nor as an adult have I ever done. Inhuman as it sounds, my experience tells me love is just one in a long line of human delusions, which begins with the idea of our superiority over other animals. Surely such a transcendental phenomenon as love is preserve of only the highest form of life, etc., etc. Of all the dreams meant to distract us from these incontestable realities, to numb us to nature's presence in us, love is the most fevered. A triumph of desperate imagination as beyond the capabilities of man as unassisted flight. Here's John Ruskin. It might be at first thought that the whole kingdom of the imagination was one of deception also. Not so. The action of the imagination is a voluntary summoning of the conceptions of things absent or impossible. And the pleasure and nobility of the imagination partly consist in its knowledge of their actual absence or impossibility at the moment of their apparent presence or reality. It is necessary to our rank as spiritual creatures that we should be able to invent and to behold what is not, and to our rank as moral creatures that we should know and confess at the same time that it is not. At the tail end of our last conversation, Credence said, "Love is God." I do believe he meant it literally. Ruskin, poor chap, must be turning in his grave. Surely it's clear to everyone that the gender war was lost and won a long time ago. The brute force of it? A fit man can see his own penis, his compass needle, his zero coordinate. A woman, from the same vantage point, cannot see her own vulva, and as one with the capacity to bear children, the ebb and flow of whose bodily cycles are so viscerally and psychically bound up with the pulse of the world's workings, She needs no such pointer. No man can ever hope to establish such a profoundly symbiotic relationship with anything or anyone. Feminism's pursuit of social, political, and sexual equality is doomed to generate increased conflict because, as everyone at some level knows, women have always been more equal. Inceldom is the last gasp of a dying beast. These pitiful wee boys who go soft in their condoms and mistake their opinions for fact, who extol the virtues of fascist strongmen leaders, who drive their vans into pedestrians and shoot their classmates, who memorialize mass murderers in their usernames, who believe that love can save the planet. It all smacks of utter defeat. The older I get, and the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that fear of death is at the root of a great many ills. Why do anything that reminds you of dying, even if it means not living? All angst is existential. Credence and pals, starved of intimacy, shun relationships. Rejection is just too much for them, just as it is for millions of non-incels. The pain is a reminder that they too are mortal and must one day die. And how about the lightweights who leave the pub without a word to their pals because, according to the saying, every time you say goodbye, you die a little? Figures of authority, cops, judges, border officials, MPs, those suits of armour. We're hardwired to the idea of hierarchies. The higher up you are, the further away death seems. No one wants to be bottom of the pile. You burned brighter than anyone I have ever met. And you resented Polly. Not just because I cared for him, but because he was your own memento mori. And so was I. There you are, in your raincoat, walking out the garden. I stop at the gate and break down. Work had to wait. Day after day I'd sit in the living room in my pyjamas, camouflaged in the furniture's floral upholstery, willing myself not to go looking for you. I'd call Olivia 2, 3, 4 times a day. Without fail, she'd pick up, listen, absorb my sadness. Your note? I didn't open it because it could never contain the words I needed to read. A week after your departure, it lay where you'd left it. Another week, and it had become lost amongst the many other pieces of paper and bric-a-brac that litter my kitchen. Finally, up and about, I ventured into Perth. All was well until I saw a rush-hour bus pulled up at a stop, its poorly tuned engine idling. The entire chassis lurched continually lengthwise, like a fairground ride, its cargo of seated commuters reading their papers, daydreaming, chatting, rocking back and forth as though having sex with unseen partners. Nadine, those bruises on the insides of your biceps, where his hands had pinned you down. I went to Morocco that Christmas and returned half expecting to find you here. The place was cold, quiet. I ransacked the kitchen looking for the note. No joy. And there I remained, sitting at the table for the rest of the day. Even now I have visions of my body bursting into flame. I still think that note is going to show up somewhere. I have no kids, just in case you're wondering. My line will stop with me. No migration of genes except in spirit, through Polly. Though I feel in perfectly good health, at 81, I can't have long to go. Death is close enough that I feel its breath on the back of my neck. But I'm not afraid, because there's nothing to fear. Not much, anyway. Putin, maybe. And Credence. He signed off with a chilling declaration that I'd see his name in lights. I find myself tuning into the news, picking up the Sunday supplements, half expecting his name to leap out at me. All the more reason to act, no? Yes. I'm coming. To you. My suitcase is packed, sitting under the kitchen table as I write. At my great age, travel by bus is free. I have a week's booking at a hotel in central Edinburgh. Transport links to your neighbourhood are convenient and frequent. My first goal, and perhaps this will be enough, is to take a stroll around your neighbourhood and lay eyes on your house. I imagine walking along your tree-lined street, passing you by, a flicker of recognition suddenly full-blown, the two of us turning, embracing, laughing with delight. Or I'm at a pavement cafe. You walk by. There's that flicker and laughter, the hug, and we're drinking and chatting, hours passing, and we meet for dinner every evening of the week. The chances of bumping into you are vanishingly slim. If I'm feeling bold enough, I will walk up to your front door and post this letter through the letterbox. Bolder, I will ring the bell and hand it to you. I leave tomorrow. Perhaps I'll wake up in the morning and bottle it. Perhaps not. Perhaps Polly will have a change of heart and pressure me into staying. As of yesterday, I have his emphatic blessing. He is here now, feet up, drinking beer, comics and crisps at his feet. And here am I, sad, old, lonely, and shaken somewhat by how, as you draw nearer, the world is opening up like a fan. Drainpipes, pavements, gutters. Things that were run-of-the-mill are suddenly star-clustered. The most mundane conversations are all song. I break down during the weediest reality TV shows. Soft rock knocks me into the middle of next week. Tiny kindnesses pack as much TNT as the sun busting out between clouds. Stillness is history. Everything shimmies. Cats wrap themselves round my ankles. I found a new silver lining inside my oldest suit to be an infestation of moths. A starling ricocheted around the kitchen. The lawn is right now plotted with a column of hoofprints. Turn the right corner, and you'll be bludgeoned by some unbearable loveliness or other. Clouds caressing the sky's blue, biscuit chimneys in a broken gingerbread house, candlelight in a hotel window, a father holding hands with his 60-year-old son, and you grow stupid on the beauty, every hour, wowed, wooed, lullabied, utterly loved up. If only I'd known the world could be this beforehand, that it only ever appeared to you as it only now appears to me. Dear Nadine, it seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more.